John, why do you love character-driven films?
I think it goes back to when I was a kid and I would watch movies in theaters or sometimes even things I saw on television. And I would get so involved with these characters. And I grew up in Brooklyn, kind of a working class neighborhood. So any opportunity that I had to be transported, out of that into a different world with people I didn't know anything about, I was always very interested in that. But the most important thing for me, I think that inspired me most, was those moments in the theater where I would sit there and recognize something in a character that I recognized from myself. And I realized I'm not alone. And that, to me, was the single most powerful thing that bonded me to storytelling and to movies. And very early on, I thought to myself, I would love to make someone feel that way. I would love to tell a story that someone sits there and goes, oh, wow, that's me. That's my family. I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not a misfit. There's somebody else. So that's really why I love it so much. And I've always tried to, everything I do, I try to make sure it's informed with, interesting characters and some depth and an arc, of somewhere to go.
Do you remember those first few movies that you saw wherever you were in New York?
I do. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but the first movie I saw, my mother took me to at the Lowe's Oriental in Brooklyn. And it was called Madam X, Joan Crawford. And, as I remember the plot, she had to give up her baby, when she was a young woman. And then years later, she gets accused of murder. And she finds this lawyer to defend her, and it's her son, And it was so fraught with, emotion. If I saw it today, it would probably be too much emotion. I don't know. Maybe it's too sentimental, but I was so, I was probably like 8 or 9 when I saw that film. And first, just being in a movie theater, I was so, wow, this is like so transportive as already. The curtains open, and I just felt the hair on my neck go up. And I was very, very emotionally affected by that movie. And on the bus going back to our apartment in Brooklyn, I started to cry. And I said to my mother, because at the end, I guess, she never revealed herself to her son. And so the secret remained. And I begged her, don't ever leave me, So, I think that was one of the first movies I saw that really made me feel very powerfully attracted to this idea of telling stories.
That's a great story.
Yeah. And I saw another movie on TV, this was. If you remember the old Hallmark Hall of Fame, before that whole brand was kind of diluted by the Hallmark Channel. But the Hallmark Hall of Fame was like the prestige television in the 50s and 60s and all the way up to fairly recently. And there was a TV production of Arthur Miller's The Price with George C. Scott and Barry Sullivan. And it was about these two brothers who came to their father's house. Their father just passed away, and they had to split up the stuff. And there was an interesting character who was there too. I guess he was like I don't know if he's a pawnbroker, but he was somebody who was going to sell and buy the stuff. And it was a great. I think George C. Scott was a brother who had become a cop, and the other brother was a more white-collar guy, and one had left and one stayed to take care of the father. So all these great, interesting, family dynamics. And again, I was very young when I saw that film. I couldn't have been much more than 11 or so, I guess. But I was, again, just so struck by the truth that I saw in these relationships and the raw emotion and the way the actors performed it. I was just so completely taken away by it. And I have to say, just then going ahead many years, I was thrilled when I got to direct my first Hallmark Hall of Fame. And I was telling when they hired me, I said, you have no idea the history I have with your show, and how it was one of the things that inspired me, to be a director, be a writer-director and tell stories.
What does it mean to understand your characters?
Well, I think as a writer, for me, it comes first from writing characters that you recognize. There might be combinations of people either personally or people you imagine. And oftentimes, for me, I think most writers, there are aspects of yourself that you put in a character. I really feel like that is the most important thing in storytelling is the character. And It's one of the things I always tell students who are starting out in film, because so many young people starting out, and I was one of them many, many years ago, but I felt, and a lot of the young people feel very enamored with the technology. It's all about the lenses and what can be done in the digital and the effects in it, and the characters get lost. And so I always try to emphasize to students how important it is to be observant of the world around you, to try to understand the people you see. Like, I live in New York, so I'm a great student of behavior. Just to go on the subway and sit there and watch people, it's fascinating. I never get bored. If I have to meet somebody on a street corner and they're late, it's fine, because there's just a show going on everywhere I look. And I think it's really important to attune yourself to that, and also your ear for dialogue, to listen to the way people speak, how they express themselves. What are they really saying? What's the subtext? What's going on underneath what they're saying? And so I feel like those are things that I urge students to expose themselves to, and not only in real life, but also in literature and theater and music. Not just watch movies all the time, because then you're just really making movies that are influenced by other movies. Going back to some like my heroes in the old Hollywood days, the John Fords and John Huston and Orson Welles, all these fabulous storytellers, Preston Sturges, and all of their work was so full of quirky, interesting, real characters. And those filmmakers all had really rich, interesting lives before they ever became filmmakers. And even John Huston, who obviously came from film royalty, his father was Walter Huston, but even he had left Hollywood, and he was a boxer, he was a newspaper reporter, he was homeless for a great deal of time. So when he came back to make his movies, he brought with it this depth of knowledge about life and people. And so that's what I really feel is so important for people to, because the technology of it, it's fantastic. But as a director, your job is simply to know what the story you want to tell is and how you want to see it. And it's really somebody else's job to now execute that, which doesn't mean that you give up any control. But when I was first starting out, I was lucky enough to kind of twig to that early on. So instead of trying to figure out, oh no, how would this shot work? How can I possibly see this guy come from here and then go over there, all in the same shot? I would just sit down with the DP, the director of photography, and say, here's what I want to see. I want to take this guy out of the thing, and we follow him in here, and then we bring him up here. How do we do that? And then they'll find a way. So then after 35 years, you get to know how you don't have to ask anymore. You get to do it. But I do think, as something I always tell students, is that don't be so intimidated by the technology or so enamored of it that you're frozen in the other areas that are so important about storytelling. Because if you surround yourself with really talented people, you get a great assistant director, you get a great camera person, fantastic sound crew, a script supervisor who's really smart. Those people will help you. They'll guide you through, as long as you're respectful and you let them know that you need their help. But your job is to focus on your vision and what you want to see, and then they'll help you figure out how to actually see it.
I love, too, what you said about public transportation. I grew up taking the bus everywhere as well.
Yeah.
And it is a fascinating, you can meet some great people, and some scary ones too, but some great people that'll just open up. And even the bus drivers will tell you everything,
Yeah,
and you can really just
That's
soak
true.
in life, public libraries, things like that.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I do come to Los Angeles, usually I'm here for a limited amount of time, and I'm always driving everywhere I go. And there are some days where I'm doing multiple meetings where I realize, wow, I have not even touched the air today. I've gone from my hotel to the garage, the car, to another garage, another office back there. And so at the end of the day, I haven't even been outside. And so I always find that I used to worry about living here, if I ever lived here full time, that sense of being cut off a little bit from life around you. And in New York, of course, that's impossible. You can't, you have to just stay in your apartment. But everywhere you go, stores, the streets, just teeming with drama. all around you. And in fact, I do this thing on my Twitter feed where every now and again I'll put overheard, and I'll come up with a little piece of dialogue that I just happen to hear, and it's great. Not long ago I heard somebody just walking by me on their cell phone, and I just heard them saying, "I'm all out of body bags. Check with me in March."
Oh no, gosh!
That's great. Where does that come from?
Oh my gosh! Professional autopsies? I
Right.
don't know.
What is that? So it's great to just try to stay in tune with what's going on around you and be a sponge. I'll tell people that it wouldn't even be conscious at a certain point as you're writing, that these things you have observed and absorbed just start to seep into it, and you start to see these characters and hear them, and you'll start to hear these familiar voices. Oh yeah, this is that guy. I know who this is. Always the greatest moment in writing. Any writer will say this. It's not my original thing, but the greatest moment, either in a script or in a fiction, when the characters start to rebel against you. And you have a plan, you're going to go here, this is where we're going with the story, this is what's happening. And suddenly, as you're writing it, you could just feel like it's just not working. They're resisting it. They don't want to go in this direction. And they want to go this way. And then I'll follow them now. And when that doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's just like golden. And that's where a good understanding of character really, really helps you out.
And is that your signal to you that this is the right direction with this? Like, I know this is a real character now.
Absolutely. And it's frustrating sometimes because you realize, oh no, I've been on the wrong path for the whole first act of the script. And now I've found the right path, great, but now I got to go back and rewrite everything. But it's a gift, and you just take it. But yeah, if that happens to me, then I realize, oh yes, I'm in the zone. And now the characters are telling me what they want to do. So they've come to life. They're real now, and I pay attention.
Are there times when the characters fall flat and you feel there is no resistance, and then you realize, should I cut this character, or do I need to really work on who this is?
Yeah, there are moments where, there's always that deadly thing where I feel like I know what this character is going to say next. And you can't have that. You just cannot. You don't want to be in a situation where the character starts to say something, and now, okay, we all know what the rest of that sentence is going to be. So when that starts to happen a lot, then I have to kind of sit down and just rethink that character. But I will say, oftentimes, there's a danger in that as well, because it can stop you, in the middle of your story, in the middle of your work. It's like, okay, now I got to stop and figure. So what I tend to do is I just go through the script, start to finish, and get it done. And as I'm going, I know, okay, this isn't right. This is not going to be, I'm going to have to work on this. But I'm not going to stop now, because then I may never finish. I may just get bogged down on this for who knows how long. And I'm going to learn things about the rest of the story as I go along, even though it's not quite right yet. So I will do everything I can. I try to even read, like when I come down in the morning to work, I don't even read what I wrote yesterday, because I'll just get bogged down. I'll start to fix it. I'll start to worry about it. I just want to get that words on paper, that sort of vomit out of the story. And then once that's done, that's a huge step. And then I go back, and now that's when the real writing begins. Once that first draft is done, and I can go back in, and I try to take a little rest from it. I have people read it. My wife, Melissa Jo Peltier, is just brilliant with story and everything else in the world. And she will give me great feedback about what works, what doesn't work. And so once you've had a little outside eyes on the material, then you can go back in and start to really mold it and shape it. But even on the second draft, I do the same with every draft. I don't stop. I just keep going. Even when I know I'm going to throw this out, I'm going to probably throw out this entire second act. But I got to keep going to get to the end, and then I'll start over again.